The reason that mothers find it less embarrassing than fathers to discuss sex with their children is because that even just talking about the subject can make males become aroused. Try and find some connection in this one, all you know-it-alls, with the more conscious and what, if anything, they might have to say regarding said condition. Ponder time. And upon hearing this, a man with a headache clutched his head and said, "Geez, I didn't know what a real headache could be like." Yes, boys and girls, storks do deliver those worthwhile migraines. Glad I could be of informative assistance. After all, the night's motto is, we live to serve. A man with a metaphor and a chamber pot is welcome at night in all parts of the castle. But what, asked the king of his consort, does a slop jar have to do with these excruciating headaches of mine? No. To live is to serve, one way or the other. The obvious won't bother you unless you see it. Query: was the preceding good news or bad news? Who's listening to me out there anyway, the many or the few? There are two areas that can be discussed regarding the struggle to be more conscious. That is, the effort and experience, and then all descriptions of it, which are all bullshit. Necessary bullshit, but compared to the effort and experience, bullshit nonetheless. Ain't talk grand. The beauty, if there be such, of involuntary thought is in the inescapable attraction of its magnetic grandeur. Have you ever wondered why the many accounts of the more conscious floating above the ground? The ordinary cry out, "Oh, but could we be free from things strange, extraordinary, and supernatural?" While the more alert merely seek escape from a thing most mundane. Only those who've been to Istanbul know what Paris actually looks like. Or, only those who can refrain from thinking know what thinking is all about. Or, only those not totally run by instinct know that man is totally run by instinct. Normally speaking, of course. Yay, team, conserve that energy. If you've read one book, you've read them all. Said one word, said them all. Thought one thought, thought them all. This, of course, was not encouragement to a team, but an exhortation to the individual. A more knowing man carries no watch. For him there is but one time, now. Query: is this a cheery wake-up call or an annoying kick to a comfortable sleeper? There was once two mythical traveling knights. One carried with him a bag of experiences, and the other a bedroll of directions. Which one would you follow? How would you distinguish between the two? How many knights are in you? Sight and digestion. The collective mind of man can see more than it can eat. The rough reality behind wondrous words. The only real faith healer is he who cures none but himself, and faith has nothing to do with it. Further refinements to common speech. There are no cures, only treatments. And amongst the routine, damn little of that. And a boy asked his father, "Then why even bother to speak?" And the only reply that came to the old man's mind was to tell the lad to shut up. But such a response seemed so unseemly in a family known by the name of propriety, first cousins of the respected and expected clans. No man can call himself enlightened who is not somehow an outcast. You're mistaken to take as knowledge anything you think that someone else has already thought. Query, is this an upper or a bummer? Ordinary minds like the idea of history in the past. It makes them feel like there's always some more time available. Far and away, pharmaceutical news. No drug is sufficient until you've overdosed their own, and no thinking adequate until you begin to gag, heave, and choke on it. Said the Blue Knight, bowing before the king, I regret that I have but the contents of one mental stomach to lay before my liege. And brushing from his breeches the slimy verbal discharge, his grace hurriedly replied, no, that's quite all right. Now move along, we've got a lot more to do today. One man left a message to himself on his mental answering machine. Don't call me here anymore. Query, just what is the difference between things mental and things verbal? Hey, don't you recognize a trick question when you see one? What ho, you big old naughty knights, you. Unless you generate your own info, you have no real info. The name of this tune is Individual Consciousness, of which there is none without continual personal attention. Some showbiz and fashion news. The more conscious never sing anyone else's song or wear someone else's clothing. The sad, sad truth. You can't think your way into a higher state of consciousness. Anything sadder than that, I don't want to talk about. From an elevated view, the difference between alcohol, drugs, and books is not as distinct as thought at local level. What is initially mystical eventually becomes common sense. The collective mental body of man absorbs all blood clots and anomalies. An alert individual creates his own. Once he got a better picture of how the situation stood, one man became concerned that other people would notice how little conscious he actually was, and even more concerned that he would not. The road to the prize is paved with intention. More regarding this kind of thing. The way to distinguish those with real interest from those with just passing curiosity is that the latter will never realize the simplicity of it, even when it's plainly pointed out to them. Vocabulary and the transcendental quest. If big words are the bane of the would-be enlightened, just wait till they get a load of the small ones and the mid-sized. Hell, all of them. As he paused at the crossroads, the yellow knight said to his steed, speech would not be the demon 'tis taken to be were it not the direct output of thought, and took his red mount's whiny as a show of sound agreement. Whinny? Only a man with consciousness under his control can claim to be conscious. Once the engine pulls out, then appears the first car, followed by an infinite number of others. Would you like to know who initially started the thing? Well, you can, but you must first get off the train. In the area between what men mentally perceive to be the landscape and where life directs them to actually live, in that land, therein does the more conscious mind reside. Update. Another reason that the good old days are not coming back is that they're still here, albeit in the disguise of tomorrow. Time for yet another simple look at it. To be more conscious is to be individually conscious. Simple enough. The king once invited two mystics to address the court. One was handsome and charming, the other plain and rough. Guess who was best received? I forget it, I know you know. The royal stable master later noted to the prince that if you wash and rub down a fancy show horse enough, underneath you'll always find a workaday mule. Refreshed and reflective, away rode the young regent, trusting that, as a metaphor, the story he'd correctly taken. Clean and stripped, sufficiently thought, and there beneath, fresh consciousness find. And they said Old English is not coming back. Some things, even potentially remarkable things, winners are losers. While in the right hands, fables, parables, and allegories can be used to help make the obscure visible and keep the obvious from blinding you, routine minds can also take them as mildly titillating pleasantries which they often accept as an experience of out-of-the-ordinary insight, which in turn helps keep them satisfied with their overall mental condition. Only a man freed from dependence on collective thought can cover all bets and thus consistently beat the house. Regarding small-time gamblers and big-time understanding, those who say that they have nothing to lose are in error in that they've yet to give up yakking about it. If talk was charity, routine minds would continually give themselves away. The unseen multi-directional stratification of time, sequence, and other stuff. By the time men get around to mentally identifying some problem, it has, in truth, by life, already been solved. One man began to instinctively suspect the apparent power and supremacy of the mind, although he found a dash of sardonic humor in my calling his suspicions instinctive, even oxymoronical and incompatible. But, said he, that knowing me as he does, he figures I probably realize what I'm doing, and he's prepared to let it go at that. See, even just verbally, it's neat being your own close companion. To ward off the chill, thrill, and challenge of Istanbul, one man wove ever-increasing fantasies about Paris. Query, do items such as this, falling one such as the one just read, cause the lad within you to ask his dad therein whether this is not yet another fine example of, first they seem to give it to you, and just as quickly snatch it all away. Yeah, but then again, what kind of knight would it be who would be satisfied with anything he could have? What, I say, what is that sound we hear? I hear nothing. Yes, 'tis the sound of attended consciousness. Unconventional commerce between the mental and the instinctive. Man again, and mental self and instinctive, with an elaboration tonight. That up here consider it to be how men think and theorize, and down here, all this having to do, if you recall, what I pointed out was lag time. For those of you at least 70 years of age, that is not to be confused with ragtime. There are, see if I can't think of several. In fact, you could actually see what I was going to do. You could do it yourself sometime if you don't find anything good on television or between the covers of books. I'm going to pick out things that would appear to be fairly obvious, and we're not here to debate the veracity of history, but just follow what I mean, both as a combination of how history has generally been taken literally and your own personal, if need be, any metaphorical expansion thereof. But now consider, I assume it was plain enough when I drew up this new kind of ad hoc description, that when you take the level of consciousness, take that wherein men at the cerebral cortical level, normally assumed to be the heart of human consciousness or the seat of it, that everything above that, for the sake of our kinds of mapping, would be a man's mental self, and everything below that would be the instinctive self. Not saying that this is infinitely or ultimately a correct telling of the matter, but for all apparent purposes it seems to be functional for the moment, because the instinctive, everything below the level of human consciousness, does seem to be, and it was normally accepted even by the ordinary, to be indigenous, instinctive, inborn, automatic, reflexive, and it is considered that the mental aspect of man is something other than that, without getting right now into the more precise debates among ordinary people about how far it is removed. It is just assumed by all humans, all sane humans, assume that man's mental self, his mind, or as it used to be called, his spirit, but his mind is in some way, a separate entity with different qualities, different characteristics and abilities, and etc., to all of his physical, normal instincts. But consider the elaboration, which does not change it, but look upon man's mental self. It may seem obvious enough that that is how men think and theorize, speculate, and at the instinctive level is how men live and operate. This is not normally taken into consideration. And I guess if I stopped here, if we had any normal, intelligent person listening, they'd go, well, no wonder, because I don't see the point of it. It's why we never took into consideration. The reality of it is everywhere. Let's skip through history. Again, don't worry. Well, you guys are supposed to know better as far as taking something literally and arguing with it, because all I can do is start plucking them out. It is generally accepted at one time men believed that they must engage in human sacrifices to make the seasons return every year so as they could plant crops. That was the theory. That was the idea. That was what they talked about. They even left written records of it, drawings and paintings. But, may I also point out, you must know, history doesn't necessarily make great inroads to record this in the way I'm describing it, but you must know that at the operational level, the instinctive level, even thousands of years ago, or in fact they were doing human sacrifices not even 1,000 years ago, 500 years ago, in large fairly civilized areas. But there was the prevailing beliefs in certain areas at certain times that you had to engage, you had to offer human sacrifices to nature to make spring return so that they could plant and the whole village, the whole tribe, the whole little civilization survive. But all you got to do is think a minute and you know damn well that operationally they had been there long enough. People had been alive long enough there in that one locale to know that spring was coming back regardless of what they did. You understand? There's always all this overlaps because if we jump back into some civilization that fits my description, we might find some people that actually believed to the point of supporting it under threat of death. That yes, we do believe if we do not sacrifice some number of humans here in the wintertime at the high solstice, that spring will not return. We've always done it, we must do it. So you might find a handful that say yes. And you said, in other words, you think if for some reason you did not throw the human sacrifices into the fire this solstice, this winter, that spring would not come back and you'd all die. You might find 2 or 3 people that go, yeah, to the point of you putting a diagram and say, come on, you're bullshitting me. Come on, admit it. And they go, no, we believe it. But the mainstream, including the priests running the affair, including the king, who may have sanctioned the whole matter, they have been alive 20 or 30 years. They can look up. They know something's going on. They know that the seasons keep going back and forth, round and around. At one time, it's reputed that the general wisdom of the day was that the earth was flat. But at the same time, men operated otherwise. At the same time, according to history in the Western world, that the prevailing belief, the maps drawn, showed the earth to be flat. Certain areas that you couldn't go past, but those same civilizations contained merchants and sailors who were sailing off past the edge and going to other places. And again, you would have found some people that were not even sailors, etc. You could always find some one outside the mainstream that say, I can't believe the earth's flat. But you understand the point of, I assume you do, I'm trying to show you that regardless of how many and whatnot, it's just not an accepted fact that then it was accepted wisdom, conventional wisdom, that the earth was flat, that was the thinking. That was the thinking, but men did not operate that way. They continued to sail on off, and they did not die, and they sailed back to the same areas, the same civilizations that were out there promoting maps, and their theories were that the earth is flat. Or many people had to have already figured out by watching shadows move. Or just they didn't have to sail off, they just go somewhere that's past the horizon. Or they live long enough to see 1 or 2 solar or lunar eclipses and see this shadow and realize, wait a minute, this thing's not flat. You know, something's weird going. At one time, it was believed that guides the belief, the thinking. Remember, we were talking about that the guides control the affairs, mortal affairs. They said that, but men continued to strive, even when that was the supposed prevailing belief, the conventional, insightful wisdom of the day, that the gods alone control the affairs of man, but still, the majority of the people got up every day, went out and plowed, tried to engage in commerce, lent money, borrowed money, speculated on wheat futures. They went ahead and operated otherwise. They operated as though, hey, I got to look after myself. Do you get the gist of it? I could get into things that would be a little more viscid to describe. This has been going on. You can find it anywhere. I could sit here and rack my brain. You've already probably thought of some. That men talk one way. They think one way, and talk being a reflection of it. Their theories, their ideas of what life is, what they are, how affairs operate, all the way from things as material as the topological configuration of our planet, to things that seem to be of a more ethereal, spiritual nature, appeasing gods or supernatural forces running our affairs. So you have a full spectrum from very mundane, from ideas of a very mundane nature, referring to very mundane and down-to-earth affairs, to those apparently having to do with man's spirit, soul, psychology, and mind. And yet, simultaneously, men were operating in a way that belied the thinking. They did not speculate. They did not theorize about what was going on. For many years, still traces of it that supposedly, well, now you can see it. It's still with us that men in certain areas believe that the kings rule through divine selection. And yet anybody walking around since is over 10 or 15 years old that lived under those conditions know that that's not true. Prince Henry got to be king by killing his father. He took the country away. He took this particular land away from the neighboring Prince Henry. And yet everybody said, well, that's true. They would bow down. You could look at it in the fields of religion. You could look at it in all the forms, the attempted explanations of what man is, why he's here, the purpose of man. The thinking, the theories change. They do not necessarily go in any sort of straight line, but they go from beliefs in supernatural forces to belief in the power of humans to direct their own affairs, and then it can shift back over to a combination of the two, and they can get into what would be called sociological ramifications. It just goes and it goes that those kind of theories change, and yet men continue to live instinctively. I might refer you back to a news item, again, from several nights ago. It said all ships have a captain topside up in the bridge and an engineer below. The captain believes that he is in charge of the vessel. He fully believes it, and no one ever says otherwise. No one. Think about it. No one ever says otherwise. Yet the truth is, he is simply, the former is simply an assistant to the latter. Same thing that I'm talking about now. How about we jump on to if you recall, I'd already described this kind of activity, mysticism itself in all of its forms, in one sense, within the parameters of these kind of verbal models. You can see mysticism as being a lag time condenser. It is like alum for that gaping hole between theory and operation. And yet we must put an asterisk and stop there, because it's not really a gap. It's not really a lag time between theory and experience. Might as well go ahead and get into it. It is not. It's not quite that simple. It's even more simple. But I was going to let's get to it, and I'll bring up one more example. You could say it's kind of the extreme example. All of these, in a sense, can be brought down to man's thinking, his theories about himself. And right now it's true, and it's been true in times past, that you can look at it as being the apex of civilized, educated, sophisticated thinking now. The best minds, the most sophisticated minds collectively of man, they think of man as being independently conscious and free. Now I know that there are exceptions to that, but now consider, if you were having to describe in this area to someone from another world, humanity, not the fringes, not the outcast, but the mainstream, that which makes humans progressive rulers of this world, top dog, that would be one of the things you would describe, probably the summation of their attributes, as opposed to the other creatures. We have this being from another world looking down, he sees us, he sees humans, he sees elephants, and he sees dogs and cats, and all forms of these life, and they might say, well, what's the difference between you and chimpanzees, you and rhinoceri? And you say, well, the thing about humans, and to cut right through all the things about architecture and art and religion and all the manifestations of man's distinguished position. The creature says, well, just, I don't know architect. Now, what is it that actually differentiates you from the others? Why do you claim your uniqueness? And you would finally sum it up as, man is independently conscious and he is free. Freedom of will, in other words. And by all reasonable, again, discount the minor quibbles that people go through, and they're just little theoretical side hobbies of men arguing this. If the whole planet, the civilized, sophisticated heart of humanity, not just you, but at the heart of collective humanity, were to describe themselves to this visitor from another world, who inquired of them, why are you people different? Why do you consider yourself singular from the other creatures? Collective humanity, their best shot, their best description, in a nutshell, would be, we are independently conscious and we have freedom of will. As we have, and it seems to be true. We are not simply instinctive. If you wanted to add a bit more to your description to this foreign visitor, you could say, well, gorillas, chimpanzees, I know sometimes they look like us. We don't want to get into that, but you could say, but all these other creatures, what appears to be their intelligence, if you would call it that, if you observe them doing something that seemed to have some logical sequence, that they seem to chase animals smaller than them that they can kill. They seem to chase only animals that somehow they know that they are faster than those animals. You do not have turtles. If you had a carnivorous turtle, you do not have a carnivorous turtle chasing a gazelle. So you could tell the creature, you could tell this foreign visitor, other creatures do not actually possess intelligence. All they're doing is operating by instinct. And they simply operate as their species dictates. There is no individual consciousness. There is no, one lion does not have to grow up and decide, what will I eat? Will I eat plants? Will I eat flesh? You understand, they have nothing resembling individual consciousness or intelligence. They, in fact, display no individuality. What keeps them alive is mere instinct. And the instinct does not vary from one line to another line if they're healthy and sound. So there's nothing resembling individuality or individual intelligence or consciousness. So you would tell the foreign visitor that differentiates us right there from all other creatures, that we have individual consciousness, individual awareness. And we also have freedom of will. Whereas you could point out again, as quite obvious should be, that in that same context you cannot attribute to any other creature anything resembling freedom of will. It's ridiculous. Animals show no sense, they show no characteristics of any freedom of will. It's just not even worth bringing up examples or to disprove it. So there would be an absolute splendid example of at the heights of man's thinking and theorizing, to describe himself that he is that intelligent, that he has risen above the mere instinctive level, that he can rise above it to such a degree that he can objectively describe the nature of instinctive life. He can see it in other creatures, and he can see it partially within himself. That itself should be prima facie evidence of man's great intelligence, his singularity. So men say that. That's their story. And yet, they strongly suspect and live otherwise. Had I timed it better, I'd just stop there, but we've got 20 minutes more of tape. And let you hang with it. I will, of course, give and start fleshing that out, but I don't really have to. I shouldn't have to. All you have to do is turn around and look at life right now. Or if you prefer, all you got to do is turn around and look at life historically. Look at all records of human existence. Look at it with a psychological bent, a sociological one, a religious one, a political one, that men continue and always have as soon as they learn to talk, right after they learn to think. Their thinking on what they were said that their distinguishing mark was individual awareness, consciousness, and freedom of will. That has been the absolute hallmark. It is the foundation of all serious literature. It is simply the banner. It is the living motto of humanity. Without it, men could not explain, they could not justify much of what they do. They would not see any purpose in striving to do things that seem to be beyond the instinctive level. They would not attempt to become more civil. They would not attempt to live in ways that seem to be more profitable to themselves. So they continue to say, and all reasonable, sophisticated, intelligent, ordinary people on this planet always have and still do say, with any prodding at all, that the distinguishing mark of man is that he is individually conscious and he has freedom of will. That be a fact. Now be the other fact. He has always and continues to live otherwise. This is the closest wrap-up example of the difference between man's mental and instinctive existence that comes to mind readily. I could have taken the one of the flat earth, and that people just swearing the earth is flat, that all the great thinkers of that day drew maps. Here it is on paper. And paper was very dear back then. Here it is. We do not squander paper. Only those whom the Pharaoh or the king has sanctioned to use paper can even possess paper. It's almost a miracle. And so we do not tolerate trifles being put down on paper. The king does not tolerate small minds, tinkerers, to use paper. The court does not adopt and sanction ideas that are not infinitely true, correct. So there it is. Just surely I've rubbed it in the ground by now. That at one area, there it was, the theory, the thinking. Well, it wasn't even considered a theory, but not in the technical sense, but the thinking was, the wisdom, but the thinking of that day in that place that we're describing was that the earth is flat. Anybody who passed for a thinker, anybody who passed for sane, anybody who passed for reasonable agreed with that. If somebody came and knocked on your door from the king, from the Pharaoh, and said, by the way, we're doing a survey. Do you actually believe the earth's flat? And you said no. It's goodbye, Abdullah. You're done for. Do you understand? They would put you away. They would kill you. It was simply the accepted reality. But men lived otherwise. One approach would be, as all of you so love, is for me to encourage you to ask yourself, what gives? Once you see, and it's not me trying to prove a point, and as I said, someday if we're just riding along and you want something better to do than listen to talk radio, listen to your own head. And just think about all the little things that pop up in history. Sometimes they go on for short periods of time, but there's always this overlapping stratification that some of it's still going on. Some of the examples I pulled out are still going on, that the thinking, the accepted thinking, the thinking that was accepted as being correct and true of some time and place, was not the way by which the men lived. When I said, encourage you to ask yourself what gives, first off is this. There are several things. Let's dismiss one of them, that they were stupid, because it's still going on, that they were ignorant, and we've grown out of it. Not so. I guess another one could be, we can dismiss that you would think, well, there's some kind of conspiracy. Mm-hmm. That's always a pimple-headed man's way out. Well, it was some kind of conspiracy. No, just take it as I presented, as history gives it to us. That at one time, people believed. They said they believed. They said they believed to the point that they would undergo cross-examination, fear of loss of property or life. That at one time and place, that men said, the king rules by divine grace, by selection. The gods selected the man. And they all went, yes, yes. And everybody there, what this kingdom was, they just got through fighting a 22-year war. And every man that had one good foot and one eye had been conscripted. He fought in the goddamn thing. And he knew the guy now, King Henry, as they call him, or Prince Henry. He used to be Henry with the big ears. He was a local blacksmith 24 years ago. He's the one that started this whole damn thing. And the people there are still alive, the soldiers, the villagers that survived it. They know that God didn't select him. There they stand around the local bar. Some of them now blind. They don't even have one good eye left, on crutches. They gave a leg. They gave an eye to get Henry of the big ears into Prince Henry. They know from their own experience that God did not select Henry to be king. Henry took it. Now think about it. This can be, I suggest, potentially most clarifying. Again, just discount all the possibilities that might first spring to mind, that, well, they were ignorant and stupid. You can't say that, because take my description of that one just then. Here it is, all the people in the kingdom, all the men. And of course, all the women were affected indirectly, so they're aware of it. Everybody there in this kingdom, now called Henryville, Henryland. Everyone in there that's still alive, that's over the age of 7 or 8, they understand how, they know, they helped him become king. They know it. They experienced how he got to be king, how he became Prince Henry. And yet here it is, a few years after he ascends the throne, or few months according to how things operate, it is now. The pomp and the circumstance, all the ritualistic court behavior has taken hold, and it's now. And he's adopted. He may have gotten the idea apparently from some other kingdom or something he heard, but it becomes accepted there. All the people in the land, with very few exceptions, and those exceptions are men with very short life expectancy, now agree that our king, dear, benevolent, wise, handsome, charming, yet stern, King Henry was selected by the gods to rule humble, undeserving people like us. They said that, and so you can't say they're stupid and they're ignorant. They knew better. They helped put him there. They know that he became king by taking it. And yet, here it is. They all say otherwise. What gives? I was refraining from bringing it when I said that it has not changed. You cannot, if for no other reason, I think I at least cleared up any ideas of, well, they're stupid. You can't have it both ways. They can't be that stupid. They're still standing there. People who fought and put him on the throne are standing there before him, now agreeing that, yes, the God selected our king. And they know it's not true. Of course, no, I guess you've got to put in the context I'm presenting. You've got to put that in quotation marks. They experientially know that he was not selected by God. But that should clear up any idea that they were stupid. But I was going to say in another way, when I said you cannot attribute it to past stupidity and that we have become too sophisticated. And I said didn't really care to get into more contemporary examples. I said you could look around because it's easier oftentimes to describe to people, to get them to look at something that seems to be of some distance from them. I could still point out to you now, I'm not going to get into it, I'll leave it to you because it would take up more time. It becomes too labyrinthine. You could still look at religion, whatever's left of that, but you could look at all of man's thinking and theorizing as to the models of what man be psychologically. In other words, all the psychological, psychiatric notions of what is man. And right now it would be hard to come up probably with a general overall model, but there are major theories that those in the professions and sophisticated people, one or two large theories, large models, you could get all the sophisticated people, let's say in the Western world or on this planet, to agree to. That yes, somewhere in those one or two general models is the explanation for human behavior, for our personalities. And they would say that, and then all you got to do is look at how people live. And they live otherwise. They do not live by their profession. They do not live by their beliefs. They do not live by their claims. They do not live by what they think. Which, for those of you that are still working with it, is how you can talk and think and not know what you're going to think next. Well, that's a hard one. Well, it is. I shouldn't make fun of it. That's a hard one for people to face up to, is how is it you can talk and you don't know what you're going to say next, and yet you go ahead. It's not a hard one. It's back to that thing. It's not so hard getting people to see something, the obvious. But goddamn, the challenge is then holding their face down to it like a dog and do until they see some significance to it, until they learn something. But especially that one, because the mind just goes, no. It's like those two little dogs polarized with magnets that you can't stick them together. They keep turning away. The mind goes, no. At any rate, you can find modern examples that certainly do not rest on stupidity or ignorance. That we still have modern, up-to-date theories regarding the nature of man that men profess. That, yes, this is the general explanation. This is our present explanation. It seems quite solid. This is what man is. This is what makes up man's personality. This is what motivates his behavior, and we have enough information. This is it. And nobody lives by it. When I say what gives, what we're dealing with is the reality behind my term lag time. It is also, even though I dismiss or warn that it is an ad hoc conditional description of always of dividing man like into the mental and the instinctive aspects, I keep saying that. But how do you explain the fact then of what I'm bringing up tonight? There sure as hell is a clear-cut division between something in the life of man. And it ain't between good and evil. Yeah. Although that was a very low-level reflection. But when I keep saying that, you can't take it serious to draw a line or any of these statements. There are two kinds of people in the world, or there are two things that run man, or there are two ways that man can operate. You cannot cut off man like that. Is why I've refined my model somewhat. That you are in toto you. You are the body. But within that body, you have, I can say that they're conditional distinctions, that you have two forces running. One of them is mental and one of them is instinctive. I can say that to help blur it and go, well, it's just we're just talking about it for a line just so we can make certain examples. I can say that, which I say it all the time, and you probably repeat it by now. You go, yeah, that's true. But if that's true, how do you explain such distinctions as I'm pointing out now? That the heart of educated, civilized, intelligent humanity at all times and all places, and not just obviously in areas, or not just in areas I pointed out of geography or politics or the agriculture, not just that, in everything that's of enough significance that men in some time and place, that's time and place. Well, I just want to make sure in case people just tuned in, that's always time and place. Unless I'm trying to describe the size of a small vegetable. That at every time and place, including the present, in the areas of the people involved in that time and place, that whatever areas they consider to be of enough importance, of sufficient importance, they will have a thinking model. They will have a mental picture, a mental model that they all agree upon. Remember the mainstream, which is all of any importance. A mainstream of anything that they consider important. In politics, they will have a thinking that is a mental ideal picture, model. They'll have it in economics, they'll have it in the religious life, they'll have it in their spiritual life, as they would call it perhaps, and their morality, and their family structures. They will have it in anything. There will be the idea of here is either the theory of what should be the best model, that is ideal perfection or true beauty perhaps, but at least they have the thinking about here is how things are. And if you turn around to everybody in that time and place and say, do you agree to that? Do you agree to that? And they all, because you can point to them. That would be the great test that they are sane and middle class and middle of the road and civilized. Not your idea, you pick out whatever it is, their general idea of what constitutes right political behavior or the correct political body politic. And you say, is that it? And you just start pointing. As fast as you can point, now, yeah. So that's it. They say, yes, that is true. We believe that. I mean, it's true. And then all you've got to do, if you're not part of them, if you can get off the train and you look, they do not live that way. They do not live faithful to their thinking. Never have, still don't. What do you make of that? That would seem to be a clear enough division. If there is no other absolutely unconditional, unquestionable division in the affairs of man, would you not agree that perhaps you have stumbled upon one now? Good and evil, they've always wrestled over that, the areas of gray, all that kind of crap. But if you want to see the possibility of one clear, observable distinction, is that not it? This is so far afield from how men think, I was even going to point out that the best it comes up with is always the reality of it in small, insignificant doses and usages does show itself, such as in criticism. It's not uncommon for one man to turn upon another man or another group of people and say, but it's an absolute criticism, a put down. It's to say, well, they talk one game and play another. Would be like Muslims attacking Jews politically, verbally, and saying, well, they talk about peace and this and that, but look over here how they burnt down our town, or Christians and Jews, or Italians and Greeks, Greeks and Turks. That's an old story, and that would almost sound like, well, there's the knowledge of it. But notice how infrequent, and notice it has no positive use. Criticism never does. It has added nothing to the understanding of the people involved for one man to turn to another. You understand why I'm bringing this up? Just to show you because some of you should begin to find this interesting on the side menu. There's the kind of things I can try to point out that no one's ever thought about in a certain way. And you see, well, that's true. But then also see that in a way they knew it, because here's little isolated, meaningless examples. They've been doing it for thousands of years, and it went nowhere. Such as the continual, remember, it's a criticism. It is not a man with any understanding, any insightful, or any useful insight into other people's behavior or human behavior. It is simply a put down. It's simply a defensive reaction to somebody. Go, well, boy, they talk one thing, those blanks. You know, picking out some nationality or some political party or some religious. Go, yeah, they talk one thing, but they do another. And as far as that criticism goes, it can be quite obvious. It's like the old joke about Cardinal Fang, the great inquisitor, that we're Christians. We're here practicing brotherly love. And if you do not agree, we shall have to torture you. We'll have to kill you. You know, good old Captain Irony again. But no one has ever seen anything useful in it. There is no widespread. There's no common knowledge of this. Because it is not a flaw in humanity. It is not stupidity. It is a functional, continuing reality that there is a lag time, and it catches up. In other words, you understand, in a sense it appears to be progress, that now in the civilized world, probably the whole world, let's assume, but at least the civilized world, we are not throwing young virgins or even old virgins into volcanoes to make spring return. So you can say that, but remember, people went ahead and planted anyway, even back when they were doing it. There were people who lived so far away from the main city where they threw the virgins in the volcano. It was several weeks before they knew whether, did the king do it again this year? But they learned. Maybe one year they forgot to do it, or one year they couldn't find any virgins. And everybody there knew spring still came back. One thing I was going to point out, there is a, well, I'll save it. Well, no. But the lag time does begin to overlap. It does begin to close up naturally. Can you see what this kind of thing is for an individual, though? Why wait 500 years? Why wait 5,000 years? Because even then, if you could wait that long, you wouldn't even feel it. If you could stay alive 5,000 years from the time that men believed that gods control the affairs of man to men believing now that they're the captain of their own destiny, and you think, well, thank God. But if you had been alive, let's say it took 5,000 years. If you had been alive for 5,000 years, you would not feel the impact of it. In other words, you would not have personally benefited from it. It would happen so gradually, you wouldn't be any more conscious than you were 5,000 years ago. The only way you can pull this kind of stuff off is you got to do it now. To make you feel better, you got to do it in this lifetime. 2, 3. You got to do it now. Did all get on?